Hi, I'm Neeraj Chandravansa and welcome to my channel. This isn't the usual form of content that I make on this channel, but it's more of a carefree conversational video exploring different ideas. And today I thought of exploring a bit of theology. I thought of exploring three arguments for the existence of God. Well, one of them isn't an argument per se, but more of a justification as to why we should believe in God. So, without further ado, let's dive straight into the video. First up, we got Pascal's wager. So, Blaise Pascal posited that the best stance to take regarding whether to believe or not believe in God was to believe in God, and his conclusion was made by treating the matter of belief as a wager. So, from a game theoretic perspective, there are two possibilities: God exists and God does not exist, and there are two choices or two decisions that we can make regarding the matter of God's existence, and that is to believe in God and to not believe in God. One case is that God does not exist and we do not believe in God. In the first case, we just live our lives not in a particularly religious way, but just live nevertheless, and our life ends. And the other possibility is that God does not exist, but we do believe in God. In this specific scenario, we are living a quote-unquote lie because God does not exist in this hypothetical case, and we are believing in something that is not the truth, but that does not necessarily mean that we are living an unhappy life per se. We live our lives in a religious way and it ends, and that's about it. There aren't any repercussions, there's no afterlife, all good. One other possibility is that God exists and we believe in God. In this case, our reward is maximized, in the sense that if God indeed exists and we believe in God, then that would mean that we will be rewarded in the afterlife. So if we try to think of this as a reward, it would be an infinite amount of good. And on the other hand, if God does indeed exist and we do not believe in him, that would mean that we'd be sentenced to hell, which is the opposite of infinite good. Infinite bad, infinite suffering, I suppose. So, out of all these four different scenarios, the best possible scenario is that we believe in God and God does exist. In that case, infinite good. But the worst case is that God exists and we do not believe in God, which would make us spend an eternity in hell. Based on these four possibilities regarding God's existence, we can make the case that we should just believe in God. Because worst case scenario, we believe in God and God does not exist, we'd have lived a lie, but wouldn't necessarily mean that we'd spend an eternity in hell. Because on the flip side, if we did not believe in God, then if God did exist, then that would mean an eternity in hell, an infinite amount of suffering, which isn't that great. My thoughts on the Pascal's wager is kind of not regarding the wager itself, but my issue is regarding making a judgment purely based on Pascal's wager. If we are going to make the decision to believe or not believe in God solely based on Pascal's wager, then that would kind of go against the core values within mainstream religions, that is faith. we are not believing in God out of faith. We are believing in Him just to maximize our pleasure in the afterlife. Would that sit right with God? In a different way, I feel like Pascal's wager is kind of an info hazard. That is, in the sense that by just knowing about the wager and making all that influence in your decisions in one way or another would ultimately result in you looking at the problem of faith in a more opportunistic way, which is a bit antithetical to pure faith. I feel like the problem with the wager is that it kind of reduces the problem of faith into mere logical deduction. And also, if you are believing in the all-knowing, all-powerful God, then that God would definitely know that your intentions weren't pure, or rather that you didn't actually care about the faith, but you just cared about maximizing your gains. So that would kind of result in you being sent to hell regardless. That aside, there is another issue with the Pascal's wager way of reasoning. That is, okay, let's suppose that a God exists. We make the decision to believe in a God, accept some religion, and then the second question that we have to ask is which God? If we make the wrong decision, then we would still fall into the camp of not believing in the right God. So suppose that there are 100 possibilities to believe in, and we don't believe in the right God. That would mean that we are still in that specific scenario where God exists, but we do not believe in Him. And there are 99 ways in this specific example that we could be wrong. So the odds are never in our favor. There is a high probability that we make the wrong decision. Now we have the ontological argument for God. Suppose that there is a being that is maximally powerful, maximally great, and maximally kind. Let's define a world in which something could exist as a possible world for that thing to exist in. For an example, let's say a unicorn. A unicorn clearly does not exist in this world, but there could be a possible world in which it could exist. That is, evolution favored its existence, or that somehow the world is structured in a way that makes the idea of a unicorn possible. That would be a possible world for a unicorn. Now suppose that there is a world in which a maximally great, maximally powerful, and maximally kind, well, I might be missing a few maximals here, but suppose that, let's just take maximally great and maximally powerful, just the two, and suppose that such a being does exist in some possible world. Then by existing in a possible world, that being would not be maximally great or maximally powerful, because it's constrained to that specific world. So for it to actually be maximally great and maximally powerful, it should exist in all possible worlds. That would make it exist in our world as well, which would make God a real being. This is the ontological argument for the existence of God. Some people do take this idea and use it to support the existence of God, but let me assess this from a different angle. Consider the statement, a married bachelor, or a square circle, or a blue that tastes like an orange. They are nonsensical, logically inconsistent, so there is no possible world for them to exist. A married bachelor has no way of existing in any possible world because it's logically inconsistent. It's absurd. Fundamentally, I feel as if there are only two possibilities if we are assuming the position of the ontological argument. Either such a being is possible in some world, which will result in that being being possible in all worlds, or such a being is not possible at all and is logically inconsistent. It's either one of the two. I feel like the notion of maximally great is a bit underdefined, and there is no possible way to properly define what something being maximally great is. So in one of the videos posted on the channel Dr. Craig Videos, which is run by Dr. William Lane Craig's ministry, they use the example of a pizza, a maximally great pizza, or maximally good, a maximally delicious. But the problem with that pizza was that it's really hard to define what maximally good or maximally great meant with regards to a pizza. It could just be a pepperoni pizza, or a chicken pizza, or whatever. It's subjective. The idea of it being maximally great is a purely subjective thing. But wouldn't that apply to the idea of God as well? Different cultures around the globe have adopted different ways to define beings or a creator, and depending on the culture, the maximal, the all-powerful being would have properties that kind of negate the properties that another culture believes in. So there are some contradictions that can occur if we accept the notion of an all-powerful, a maximally powerful, maximally great being, because the idea of being maximally great is hard to define. But that doesn't necessarily make such a being impossible. But I feel as if trying to define a maximally great being might be a purely subjective assessment to make. Does that mean God does not exist? I simply do not know. But that does kind of suggest that such a being might not be possible as well. So the ontological argument, if we are assuming it to be consistent, would suggest that either a maximally powerful, maximally great being is possible or not. And moving on to my favorite argument out of all these three ideas, the Kalam cosmological argument. I did not get into the nitty-gritty of this, but from what I've understood from the outset, the Kalam cosmological argument is as follows. Every event has a cause. Suppose that I throw a ball up. So the cause for that specific event was me throwing the ball up. The action of throwing resulted in the ball going up. So if the ball being suspended in air at that particular time interval, at that particular instance, the cause for that event to occur was me throwing the ball up. So moving a bit backwards in time, what resulted in me throwing the ball up was my brain sending its signals necessary to activate the muscles to throw the ball up. And we could trace it back and all the way back to the beginning, if a beginning did exist. Then either it's an infinite regress and it goes on to infinity, or it terminates itself at some point. So it's more of if this happens, then that happens, and if that happens, then something else happens. A set of conditionals, but if it keeps on going backwards infinitely, and if there is no satisfaction of the initial predicate, then wouldn't that make the whole chain of conditionals never occur? If you keep on going back by an infinite number of events and there is no point in which it terminates, then nothing had actually happened, because infinity is a bit imaginary. So most theorists believe that such an infinite regression would result in nothing actually happening. Because if this has to happen for this to happen, then if you keep on going backwards, and since we cannot find a since we cannot find a first cause, then you could just keep on going backwards infinitely and it never ends. So when did the whole chain of causality begin? And since I do have a mathematics background, I feel as if infinity does not necessarily mean impossible. Like, the concept of infinity isn't completely divorced from reality. So in the Zeno's paradox, if you keep on dividing the distance, you end up with the absurd statement that Achilles can never reach the turtle. So, and we know that Achilles always reaches the turtle. So what gives? So instead of throwing away infinity as this absurd concept, we could look at it this way. So the Kalam cosmological argument supposes that there are events which would result in future events. So how do we keep track of events? So what defines an event? So some change that occurs in some time interval. The time interval is arbitrary. But suppose that there is an instance and there's another instance in time. Infinity can be removed as something absurd, then the second event can never occur. This is my argument for that. In order for change to happen from the first event to the second event, some time has to pass. Let's say we have an X amount of time, then before we complete the X amount of time, we have to complete X divided by 2 amount of time, and X divided by 4 amount of time before completing X divided by 2. And if we keep dividing that infinitely, does that terminate at something that's fundamental, like the smallest unit of length? So it's like, if we keep on zooming in and in and in, do we end up somewhere which we cannot zoom any further in? So similarly in time, do we get a fundamental unit in time? If it does not, if it never terminates at some point, then it goes on to infinity. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the second event would never occur. And in infinite series, we do have a thing called convergent series. And the series 1 over 2 plus 1 over 4 plus 1 over 8 plus 1 over 16, so on and so forth, it sums up. It converges to a constant number. So that division of time eventually gets summed up. Discarding infinity within the context of the Kalam cosmological argument is because that no infinite amount of events can occur, so backwards in time. But if we consider the case of one event occurring and another event occurring, and there being some time between the two, and if we keep on dividing it infinitely, then it either terminates at some point, or there's simply an infinite number of events or smaller events that resulted in the future event. So even in that small time span, there are an infinite number of events. If the argument supposes that if an infinite number of things has to happen, then that thing never happens, then we can never do anything in the real world. But we all know that things happen, things move, there's motion, there's, like, life goes on. I can't clap. So an infinite number of things can happen, but the question is, so my understanding of it is that even in that example of two things happening, there was a first cause. So the idea that infinity or an infinite number of events cannot occur can be ignored temporarily, but that doesn't still disregard the Kalam cosmological argument, because we still had an event one, it's like an initial position. The argument simply states that first instance was created by God. So analysis of infinity does not simply negate the idea that there was a first cause, because even in our small example, we had a first cause. What happens if we keep going backwards and by an infinite number of events? I feel like I don't have the necessary reasoning faculties to grasp what that would imply. If there is a first cause, then that first cause is best explained by God. That's the position put forward by Dr. William Lane Craig. So the Kalam cosmological argument is named after Kalam, the medieval Islamic scholasticism. And William Lane Craig used this as a foundation and kind of made a solid argument for the existence of God. This discussion of the Kalam cosmological argument was simply a more conversational analysis. So obviously there might be some misinterpretations and mistakes that are made in my caricatured paraphrasing of the argument. But I do find it very interesting, and I feel like this is the argument for the existence of God. But there are issues that I do have with regards to this argument. This was just an exploration and not at all a conclusive video regarding either of these arguments. And I do intend to explore these arguments in future possible videos. This is more of me just brainstorming and just yapping regarding what I've read, what I've watched, and what I've heard. So if you do have any suggestions, and if there were inconsistencies and issues with regarding what I said today in the video, then feel free to comment them down below. And if you like the video, then perhaps leave a thumbs up. Even though this is a monologue, this is sort of a discussion where the replies come later in the form of comments. I'm just saying my ideas and what I've researched, because this is just me speaking on top of my mind, and in return I would appreciate your ideas and anything you have to say regarding anything, actually. So like the video, hit a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to be notified whenever I upload, and comment obviously, and catch you guys in another video. Thank you for watching.